What are some scary urban legends you have heard of? Red tag. A hospital assistant and a nurse stepped inside the elevator to head to basement 2, where the parking area is. On the way to basement 2, they have to pass by basement 1, which is where the morgue is located. The elevator stopped in basement 1, and the doors opened. The hospital assistant and nurse saw a naked man running towards the elevator. The hospital assistant frantically pushed the close button of the elevator before the man could get in. As the elevator resumed its descent to basement 2, the nurse asked why the hospital assistant closed the door before the man could get in. The hospital assistant said, "Didn't you see the red tag on his wrist? Red tags are for dead people who are scheduled to be embalmed the following day." The nurse was puzzled. "Red tag? You mean something like this?" The nurse showed the red tag on her wrist. I don't know how common this is, although in my state there is an area of woods referred to as the 7 Gates of Hell. The story goes that there used to be a mental hospital nestled in the middle of the woods. The first and second gate are overtaken by the tall grass and the only original standing parts of the entrance. Apparently there was a massive fire that consumed the hospital. Some perished, others were left to make their way through the woods. If you plan to go, you need to go at sundown. Once you pass through the first 2 gates and proceed, you begin to hear a rustling in the bushes. However, even approaching the 4th gate is where most people decide to turn back. You feel as if you're being watched or someone/something is rushing around you. The legend has it that you begin to hear whispers or shouts as you getting closer to the 7th gate. The very last gate is supposed to be the mental hospital in flames. Whether or not you can find the trail to return to the first gate is unknown. Our local high school, small Midwest town, total of 300 students in the school, was built right beside the local cemetery. The story goes that during construction, a mysterious woman went up to the group of men working and said something along the line of "No full class will graduate from this school." And it's a fact that every class has had someone or multiple students die before graduation. A woman breaks down on the I-47. She can't hear a thing, not even crickets. There isn't a soul around. She is texting her mother to help her see what's wrong, and from the sounds she heard, her mother declares she has a flat tire. She is about to get out when she hears a scraping noise. Click scrape click scrape click scrape. She looks up and sees a creature with holes where eyes should be, a messed up jaw, and a limping leg. She hops in the back seat, almost screams, but catches herself as her car wasn't on, and though the creature may not have seen her, she can hear it louder and louder. Click scrape, click, and it comes to a stop. She can hear heavy breathing, but other than that, nothing. She hears it again. Click scrape, but this time, fading away. She stays stiff as a board until sunlight. She gets up, looks around, and the creature is gone. An old farmer stops by to help her, and he couldn't help but see her staring. He explains how he had an accident on the I-47 a few years back, and he has a hollowed eye and a dislocated jaw. He helps her fix her tire, and she is about to get back in her truck when she hears it again. Click scrape. She looks around, startled, and notices the old man has a peg leg, limping. She is frozen by fear. The old man looks at her, asks her what's wrong. She says nothing, and gets in her car. He hops in his truck and pulls up by her car. He makes a gesture to roll down the window, and he says this: "The dead man never forgets." Not exactly an urban legend, but here it goes. There was a wealthy old woman my mom used to work for when I was a teenager who lived all alone in a centuries-old house. She had mobility issues, so she had lived in the dining room only for decades, which she had converted to a living room/bedroom. When my mom was busy, I would do odd jobs for the woman, who would send me into different rooms of the house to tidy up. These rooms hadn't been opened in 20 or 30 years, and there were 2 or 3 that used to be her late husband's medical practice. There was an actual human skeleton hanging in the examination room, medical supplies that were 30 years out of date all just lying around. It was creepy, but nothing really scary. A few times when I went down to get paid after finishing up, we'd hear noises like someone was walking around in the house, and she'd nonchalantly just say, "It's just spooks." I never believed in ghosts and still don't. One night though, when she was out of town, She wanted someone to watch the house because she was afraid of break-ins. My dad and I stayed over, and after we had locked all the doors and windows and got ready to go to sleep, I heard someone walking in the halls. I shot out of bed immediately to find my dad doing the same. He was an engineer and a diehard skeptic, so it really scared me when he said, "Let's get the hell out of here." We left in the middle of the night and never went back. During high school I worked at a movie theater. I was an usher. Yeah, not very exciting, but as a high schooler it was fine. Nevertheless, I was being trained and guided and had to clean the theaters and take out the trash to the compactor. The elevator to the compactor always felt weird for me, and I'm not claustrophobic at all. After a while, one of my co-workers told me that a past employee years ago had a heart attack in that elevator and that they found his body the day after. This was the reason why they were so paranoid on always having ushers on pairs and never leaving them alone. Even though I thought it was BS because an employee said it. On Sundays the theater was barely active, and when it was just children, teens, or Hispanic families, which were nice most of the time there. I remember going into a Spanish following movie at one of the rooms. It was room 6 I believe, and I was alone since my companion was late. This was the opening shift, mind you. So I was brushing and sweeping the popcorn after the people left, and I noticed the reflection, as if a person was on the projector room. "How's it going, Brandon?" I called, as that was one of my managers, or so I thought. After a while I heard steps coming to my aisle and I chuckled brashly, saying, "What took you so long?" And I froze in pause as there was no one behind me. I thought it was them pulling a prank, but then I heard the steps again, and I just rushed down outside the theater. Later on, the managers confirmed to me that in fact a guy died in the elevator to the trash compactor. Also suspicious since the trash compactor elevator is close to theater room 6. And everyone would say not to go alone to theater 6. Every time we would sweep we would notice someone at the projector, but no one was inside. It was strange and creepy. I do not know what it is of that movie theater nowadays, but from friends that have gone they have told me sometimes they noticed a person on the projector and asked if they still did the old tape projectors. I said yes to make them feel enthralled, but that just made me even more suspicious of that movie theater. So this is an urban legend in my school's 4th floor bathroom. Basically a student walks into one of the stalls and does her business. Then a voice starts to whisper to her saying respicite over and over. She starts getting freaked out, so she finishes up and leaves as fast as she could without looking back. Then she tells the story to her very religious teacher, who happens to be a good friend of hers. The girl mentioned the weird whispers and the teacher's face turned pale because the word respicite is Latin, and if translated into English, the voice was telling her to look up the whole time. The one that sticks with me is, a woman is driving home at night down a dark back road. She passes a big 18-wheeler, which swerves into the left lane behind her right after she passes and begins flashing its lights. She checks to make sure her brights aren't on. They aren't, and speeds up, thinking the truck driver must be angry with her. But he keeps riding her bumper, periodically flashing his lights. Eventually, she pulls into her driveway, and the truck pulls right behind her, brights on full blast. The trucker runs up to the car carrying a loaded shotgun and fires into her backseat. She turns around and sees a dead man laying on her floorboards with a knife in his hand. I don't get in a vehicle without checking the backseat, no matter how sure I am that I locked the doors, because of this old and infamous urban legend. My hometown had a man whose face was severely disfigured from an electrical burning. He lost his eyes, nose, and one ear. He would take walks on a lonely stretch of road at night, as he was hesitant to go out during the day. He'd feel his way along with a walking stick. He was hit by cars more than once. He was called Charlie No Face, or the Green Man, for no apparent reason. People would go out on that stretch of road listening for the tap tap of his cane, and offer him a cigarette if they found him during his walk. Not sure this counts as urban legend, because it was super specific to where I grew up, but my elementary school had a big field for kids to play in during lunch and whatnot. On one side, right by the fence, there was a huge tree that someone had tied a bunch of chicken bones to, all up in the branches. So being small and having underdeveloped brains, all the kids believed those were children's bones and that if you went to the tree alone at night, a man would come out of the roots, eat you, and add your bones to the tree. This was kinda something that was just talked about in a pool of friends with me, but here we go anyway. So one day I was out in the woods with a couple of my friends and neighbors. My neighbors had to go back to their house for lunch, so me and my friends decided to split up and look around the woods for some branches to build a fort out of. My friends went a little further out than I did, so I was waiting at the fort for a bit for them to come back when I heard rustling behind me. I figured it was just a deer because there was and still are a ton of them in my area, so I just kinda ignored it, but I kept hearing it back and forth in what sounded like the same spot, but getting closer each time. I tried to ignore it, but I eventually turned around and I saw what looked like a person on all fours covered in moss and dirt, and then they ran away. Scared the Jesus out of me, so I ran away, but yeah, never found out what it was. Had to text my neighbors that I had gone inside. My friend saw me sprinting up the hill to my house. Not super spooky, but it gives me the chills to remember what it looked like. A woman in a village was known for her beauty. Every day she would go around her village and ask, "Am I pretty?" Her husband was at war, so she decided to take advantage of that and cheat on him. When the war was over, her husband drank and got drunk for a little while and his friend told him about a beautiful woman. They marched to her house, and when they got there, her husband said, "This is my house," and he walked in on his wife cheating and stabbed the man to death. He then grabbed his wife and he held him sword up to her mouth. "Do you think you're pretty?" he asked. She said yes, and he slit her mouth with the knife while she wouldn't stop screaming. She came back as a yokai. This abandoned convent house I used to live down the road from in a small West Texas town has a hell of a lot of rumors about it. Officially it was shut down due to a tornado weakening the infrastructure, but kept up for historical preservation. Built by Germanic Carmelites in the 30s. Odd thing is this was a region not known for large or devastating tornadoes, and as the years went by the stories came up about this house. One of the strangest theories that came about in that town I heard from my cousin, and that the real reason it was shut down was the priest impregnating the nuns and sisters and having to hide the evidence over the years by killing and burying the newborns in the basement levels. Weird crap.